meeting is called to order. Dr. Lake, do we have any changes to the agenda?
We do not.
Do I have a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Andy and a second by Jen. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 7-0. Tonight's workshop is a workshop over the topics of student growth and achievement reports, legislative update, and the gifted identification updates and yearly program evaluation. We will begin with Dr. Tara Sparks.
Well, I will be very brief as I introduce Dr. Jill Lawson, who is going to share our annual student growth and achievement report. As she gets settled, I will turn it over to her to share all of this information with you.
Hello, I'm so excited to be here tonight, this afternoon, and I'm happy to share a snapshot of how our students are growing academically. As we remain focused on ensuring success for each student, the data I'm presenting today offers key insights into both how far we've come and where we need to go. Before we dive into the data, I want to emphasize our approach to assessment is rooted in balance. We rely on a combination of state, district, and classroom level data. Assessment is not just about accountability, but more importantly, to guide instruction and support student growth. This afternoon, we will take a satellite view of our district assessments. There will be areas to celebrate and opportunities to grow. And it is all about insight. So we will see the big picture, but not always the full picture, as we know each of our students they're unique learners, and through the balance of how we measure and collect evidence, our insights can become more clear. So we're going to start our growth and achievement review with our earliest learners, kindergarten through third grade. So these assessments up here help us monitor foundational literacy development throughout the year. This is our last year with FastBridge assessments and that platform. So next year we will begin our new DESE-approved reading assessments called iReady. So here are 4 assessments provided to our early learners for literacy. All assessments are administered in the fall, winter, and spring, and our target outcome is low risk, and when available, low risk in advanced. All right, so we're going to start here with kindergarten and first grade with the FastBridge early reading assessment. In the top left, you will see results for kindergarten and first grade for both fall and spring. The chart on the right will show the cohort when available. So we talk about this every single year, but the subtests and assessments that are provided in the fall are not the same as the assessments that are provided in the spring. Well, some are not the same. Some are, but not all of them are the same. So in the fall for kindergarten, the students are assessed in concepts of print, onset sounds, letter naming, letter sounds. And in the spring, it's letter sounds, and then we drop some of those and we add some more complex skills such as word segmenting, nonsense words, and sight words. So we talk about this every year about a little bit of the how the percentage changes from the fall to the spring as the complexity of the subtests come in. And we see that in the fall we had 77% of our students in low risk, and in the spring we have 61% of our students in low risk. But I want you to pay attention to that yellow and hold on to that for a second, because I'm going to come back to that in just a moment. For our first grade students, in the fall we have word segmenting, nonsense words, sight words, and sentence reading. And then in the spring we drop sentence reading and we start to take on CBM reading, which will in the future be referred to as passage reading. But for FastBridge's sake, we're going to call it CBM reading tonight. So in the fall, we had 60% of our students in the low risk category, and in the spring we have 53. But again, please look at that yellow if you don't mind here. In a moment, I'm going to come back and refer to that as well. Combined kindergarten and first grade had 58% of our students showing typical to aggressive growth. And I know the word aggressive sounds a little harsh, but that's the terms that are used in FastBridge. So students will show typical to aggressive growth and typical starting at that 41st percentile and above. And aggressive, I believe it's in the 85th percentile and above. So I want to talk about our students who are almost there. And so I'll get to that in a moment, but I didn't review the cohorts, so I'm gonna go back to that. So we do see a dip from our kindergarten to our first grade cohort. We did not see this dip last year, so it's not a pattern that we can refer to from the previous year to see, but we did see that particular dip here. But now I'm gonna go into our almost there because I feel like this tells a little bit more of the story. So as I mentioned in the beginning, the big picture does not always represent the full picture. And so we know that growth is happening when you look at individual students. This is a small snippet of a first grade data wall. I did this last year as well, but I think it is so important to look at this. And this, I'm only going to show this particular picture for the early reading, but this could be applicable to any grade level, any assessment that I'm going to provide for the rest of this report. So in this particular snippet, you'll see student scores. And in the spring for first grade, students need it greater than 65 score for their spring to be in the low risk category. And so if you look at the top 3 rows and a few in the middle, it will show students who were low risk green in the fall and moved to the yellow, some risk in the spring. Now I'd like for you just for a second to ignore the colors on this particular page and just look at the numbers. And you will see that these are our students who are so close, almost there. And I just really want to celebrate and emphasize them because they don't always show up when we look at things just from that satellite view and that big picture, but that there's so much growth happening for these particular students. And even for our students in the 4th row down below, there's one particular student had a score in the fall of 27. And if you look at their spring score, I'm on the 4th row, moved to a 64. There's so much to celebrate. That is a great story right there. I hope that the parents, the teacher, and the student can look at that and say, wow, I've done a lot. And so when I say, please pay attention to that yellow, the yellow does not mean some risk. And I put such a big, pretty green there for those students that are on grade level, but the yellow, there's a lot of great stories that are happening within the yellows too. And so I like for that to transfer as I move through the growth and achievement report as we go forward. Not trying to hide anything, not making any excuses. We want all of our students to be in the green, but we do want to celebrate when kids make great growth. All right, so
I have a quick question.
Sure.
On the last one, I like that you included like the percentage of students that are showing typical to aggressive growth. Is there kind of a benchmark for what that should be, like a targeted percentage, or does that make sense?
Well, when you look at things from if they're norming growth, and is typically what they do, and you're looking at the average growth that they've seen students make from whatever scale score they had, it's usually 50% in the 50th percentile. And so what they do is 50% of the kids will make it, 50% of the kids won't, and that's how they cut those particular scores. Now, they don't always norm every single year, so typically you'll have 50% of the kids above typical growth and 50% below typical growth. And we, in our district, we're always trying to beat the norm. We always want to be above the average.
Okay.
In every case. But I had to ask that question when we first started doing NWEA, because we wanted 100% growth, but that's not always how it will work. And then when you do start to see a lot of districts and all the schools in the pool start to make that particular growth, well, then they're just going to recut the norms.
Yeah.
So.
Thank you.
So there's that data wall, and I want to share that this is really small, but there's a long list of this throughout and for every single assessment and so on. All right, so we're going to go ahead and move on from kindergarten and first grade early reading and on to second grade. This is the second grade FAST A reading assessment. On this chart, students have the opportunity to score low risk and advanced, so this is not a timed assessment, and we do not have cohort data since it's only provided in the second grade. This is a broad computer adaptive reading assessment that measures overall reading achievement, FAST includes concepts of print, phonological awareness, phonics, vocabulary, and comprehension, all in a comprehensive way. 59% of our students showed typical to aggressive growth from fall to spring. I thought this was interesting, so I pulled this one out. 68% of our students with IEP showed typical to aggressive growth, so that was something really great to pull out and celebrate. One thing to know about students who are in categories such as special education or tier 3 intervention or in any kind of risk type level, they need to make more than typical growth to ever move out of any placement. So students may make their typical growth, they may make pretty good growth, but if they don't make aggressive growth, which is what FastBridge calls it, they're likely gonna stay in their particular placement, but there still may be some great things to celebrate on how they did. All right, so what
Can I
we
ask
do.
a question?
Absolutely.
Sorry,
Yes, yes,
that
go.
was really scary and really loud. Do you have any information on, those are kids with IEPs, but what about the kids who are just in tier 2? Any information on
I don't
their
have
growth?
anything here
I figured you
tonight.
didn't hear, but
Yeah.
I just thought that would be interesting to know as well, to see that it's, you know, there's all these different, oh, Craig has his hand up. Okay.
Tier 3 could.
All right, I'm going to repeat that just in case anybody's watching this later, they might not have heard him. Craig said, or Dr. Hamby said, that the kids in tier 2 at elementary go in and out so often that they wouldn't really be able to track that and have it be meaningful.
Well, and I think though, you're probably asking about tier 3 because IEP kids would be considered tier 4.
Tier 3 would be our students who are getting reading intervention, so they have a reading success plan, and those students, we do tag those, and so we could run numbers to see what that level of growth is for them.
Okay.
So what we do want to celebrate on this particular slide is the decrease of our students in the high-risk category. So that's pretty amazing. So this is a good one. All right, we're now moving on to 2nd and 3rd grade. This is fast auto reading, and it's administered to students in 2nd and 3rd grade. So this measures word identification, vocabulary, and encoding. I just thought this was interesting. 96% of the students who were low risk in the fall were also low risk in the spring, and that was applicable to 2nd and 3rd grade, just something that I pulled out. But 84% of our students were low risk in the spring in 2nd grade and 85% low risk in 3rd grade. And the cohort data shows a really positive trajectory. Students did pretty well in encoding, while we did have our lowest subtest was word identification at 79%. Definitely want to celebrate meeting this target with this particular assessment. It is timed, which can also bring a stress factor to kids. And if you've ever seen this particular assessment, it pops up, they have to answer, or it just goes on. So it has a whole like stress factor added to it. And it is timed, but the goal is to capture the students' automaticity so that they're answering it with speed and efficiency. Okay, so we are now on to CBM, Fast Bridge Still, CBM reading. We administer this in 1st, 2nd, and 3rd grade, and actually the 1st grade is a part of the early reading 1st grade comprehensive score, but I pull it out because CBM reading is so important to us, so important that it's part of our compass goal on teaching and learning. So, it measures fluency and accuracy. And our compass goal is actually for 3rd grade. Our goal is that 80% of our students in 3rd grade demonstrate low risk or advance on this, and we met this because if you look at the 3rd grade spring, you'll see that we're at 86%. But I do want to highlight that the 1st grade in the spring was at 82%, 2nd grade in the spring was at 85%. And so on. So we do have some very positive performance data to share with you on this tonight. Very, very happy to see those high risk decreasing from fall to spring as well. If you look at the second grade cohort, it's a slight dip in the scores, but not a whole lot. But in third grade, we really do see that positive performance building over time. So reading, definitely still some areas where I don't want to say, oh, there's nothing to look into, but there's definitely some positive gains in the reading over time from when we first started administering FastBridge to where we are now. And so definitely seeing some impact of some things that were put into place. So we'll continue to do that, or we'll continue to look into that as we go on. So on our next slide, we're going to, before I do that, I want to just remember that we will no longer be doing FastBridge in the future, but I will do my best to try to show some comparison over some of the subtests that we have between FastBridge and our new. And I think passage reading will probably be the easiest one to continue to monitor that growth from, even though it will be a new assessment. We'll be getting new baseline data, but we'll be able to say, well, just for context, here's how we performed on the previous assessment on CBM, which is very similar to passage reading. So we'll see how that works. So for our we're still with our early learners, but we're now going to take a turn to math. So in math, we provide, we use iReady Diagnostic. We administer this at the district level as a district approved assessment for kindergarten, first and second grade. Third grade, fourth grade, and fifth grade do use this as part of their curriculum, but when it comes to our early learners and their district assessment plan, it's K through 2 for iReady. We administer this in the fall, winter, and spring. In the language, we now have 5 placements. And so we have more than a grade level above, less than a grade level above, on grade level, less than 1 grade level below, and more than 1 grade level below. So we'll be looking at on grade level, less than a grade level above, and more than a grade level above as our hope. That's what I'll be lumping in when I say, oh, this percentage of our students have met our target. Again, less than 1 grade level below is going to appear in the yellow. Remember, yellow is just needs a little bit more support, and how can we dig in and help our students. So we are still on those early learners. We have these 5 placement levels. I may change how I visualize this in the future, but you'll get the idea. This will be very similar to what we will have K through 8 moving forward. And it will be very nice to have a very smooth and seamless assessment platform, because what I've always been trying to do is take the 3 different assessments platforms that we use and try to make them look consistent for our audience so that they can work through these growth and achievement reports seamlessly.
That's exactly what I was thinking. Like, it'll be nice to look at one thing. Like, all the same language, all the same graphics. It'll be nice.
Right.
So,
And maybe I can even use some of the visuals in the platform, because it has some very nice visuals, so it will be great. All right, so we are on iReady. iReady is unique because it starts the year assessing students on the Missouri Learning Standards that they should master by the end of the year. So we know that it's almost like a pre-test and a post-test. So students are assessed on standards they have not been taught. So it's very common to see in the fall a lot of yellow. So think about this for next year when I'm showing you the data as well. So, and then as the year goes on, we should see the green start to fill the bar. For our kindergarten, we saw that we moved the placement to 81% of our students were at the target level. And in first grade, we have 77% of our students in the target level. And that was first grade. And in second grade, we have 72% of our students in that particular target level. For kindergarten students, they cannot score below grade level. So it just stops at less than 1 grade level below. They cannot score more than 1 grade level below is what I was trying to say. So taking a look at this, it is aligned to the Missouri Learning Standards. Students are assessed in number and operations, algebraic thinking, geometry and measurement, and data, all aligned to Missouri Learning Standards. Placement opportunities increase as the students move up into grades, so we do start to see kids go into different placements as they move up. 64% of our students in K through 2 made typical to stretch growth. I'm changing the term aggressive now to stretch, because that's what iReady uses. So typical to stretch growth, most of that in the typical, but still students moving beyond. It takes a lot of growth to get into that stretch category. So it's something that we'll be expanding our learning on as we move into this assessment moving forward. I just want to take a look at the cohort here. As the standards get more complex, we do see an opportunity to grow here, ensuring our students are moving along and getting exposure to rigorous learning opportunities. We don't love how our cohorts are moving in this particular path. We have a lot of students who are almost there, but we nice to get them particularly there. Know that looking into our math is a big priority for all of us. We put a lot of attention into reading, and we're seeing a lot of great impacts of all of that work. The level of professional learning, the level of opportunities teachers have had to really get into the science of reading has been really great. And I would recommend that we would always start there in any situation when we're looking at how do we support our teachers who have very limited time and can't take on the world. And so we have done a lot of great things with reading. And so I think now we can see that we're getting some positive impacts. If we look at it through an NTSS viewpoint, we can see that the majority of our students are responding well to our curriculum in reading. Doesn't mean we don't have areas to grow, but that 80% of our students, when we look at adaptive assessments, are showing some stuff. So now it's time to really take that dive into math. You guys are probably well aware of all the things that are going on behind the scenes, but just for the audiences, just really digging into professional learning opportunities for our teachers and opportunities for them to dig in and work as a PLC with experts on how they can improve their math scores. And I'll leave the rest of that up for anybody else who wants to share more about that moving forward. But I do want to take one more second to, maybe a minute to talk a little bit about iReady. And this is probably, I think that all of you are very familiar, but I'm always thinking about our families who may be watching and wanting to learn about some of our assessment systems. The really great thing about iReady is that is criterion reference and norm reference. This is going to be a new thing for us in the reading and the math world K through 8. Again, K through 2 has been, or K through 5 kind of has been playing around with this, but this is going to be a really positive change. I was really pleased with NWEA. I think it taught us a whole lot as a district about how we're looking at our data and growth over time. I think it served a really great purpose. But as we continue to grow in what we're doing, our demands and our wants and how we can use assessments for instruction continue to grow too. So I think this next move into iReady and what it has to offer as a criterion reference assessment is really going to give us what we need as a district, and that seamlessness all the way through, watching our students grow, is going to be a really, really great experience. So just to give you a little bit of an idea, thinking about criterion and norm reference, I like to think of the roller coaster, to think of a roller coaster analogy. When you're looking at criterion referenced assessments, you're really looking at, are students on grade level or are they not? You're looking at a particular standard and you're saying, are students there or are they not? Just like if you were going to get on a roller coaster, there's a height requirement. You have to be 48 inches to get on this ride. And you either are 48 inches or taller and you can go on the ride, or you are not. And so it's really going to tell us on grade level, are the students there, or are they not, and where can we go? And it will break that down so teachers can use that particular standards-aligned, standards-based assessment to make some decisions in the classroom. When you look at that normed reference assessment, which does also serve a very good purpose, we're really looking at all those students, or all those people in line for the roller coaster. It's not, are you tall enough? It's, we're gonna take the top 10 tallest in line of all of those that are in the pool, and we're gonna say, you meet the qualifications because you're in the top 10 to move on and get onto this particular roller coaster. So again, it's more about the comparison to the peers instead of, are you meeting the target or not? And so, again, criterion and norm reference together is going to be a great tool for us to have as a district, and I think they both serve a really great purpose. Are the students meeting the standard, and how are they doing in comparison to their peers? So just a little bit additional about the excitement we have for the assessments going forward. Going into NWEA, here we go into our advancing learners in NWEA and beyond. So we're moving out of those early learners into our advancing learners, and we're starting to see confidence grow within our students and, understanding, deepening for our students. So we administer NWEA to third grade to high school, and in high school, we give it at English 1 and Algebra 1. And the language for NWEA is going to be high, average, and average. Those are going to be the targets that we're looking for, and low, average, and low are the targets those are things we don't necessarily want to see as high. We know that they're going to exist because we serve all learners, but we don't want those to be very high. Okay, so here we are for reading. Our NWEA results for reading show some positive performance data in the spring for all 3 grade levels. They met the goal of 80+% in the average and above. So looking at the top in third grade spring, we see that the students in third grade ended at 83% of the students in the average to high. In fourth grade, we're in the same place, 83% of our students in average to high. And in the fifth grade, classes, we are at 84% of our students in the average to high. So this particular assessment is really just about reading. It's about informational text, literary text, and vocabulary. And this is also computer adaptive assessment. 65% of our students in third through fifth grade showed average to high growth in NWEA. And I'm going to show you later that we have, as a district, set a target of 70% of our students would show growth. We were not at 70% as a district ever, but we like to set extremely ambitious goals in hopes to just really set those standards high. But 65, about that area is where we have been over time. And again, looking at that norm of, that average is at that 50th percentile. We want to be well above the amount of students that would show that particular growth. So we do know that we do have some areas to look at when we get into student groups, and I'll show a little bit of that. But overall, our students performed very similar on each of the subtests, with literary text being slightly above some of the other ones. Looking at our cohort, we had a slight increase in fourth grade from third grade, and we had we stayed the same in our cohort from fourth to fifth grade.
Jill, can I ask a quick question about
Please.
growth again? Just because there's so many things to help me remember. The growth is dependent on their actual score, not the group that they're in. So if a student starts in high average and then moves to continues to high average, are they considered that no growth, or is it based on their actual
It's based on their actual score. Okay. So with NWEA, each student is given a RIT score, and the psychometricians who are behind all the NWEA scores have normed each RIT score and what a student scores in the fall, what their typical growth would be, their average growth, or what high growth would be throughout. So they have done that for each and every particular score and projected what a student should make to get to that average growth.
Thank you.
All right, so we'll go ahead and move on to third, fourth, and fifth grade math. So third through fifth grade NWEA, we have fourth and fifth grade performing at or above our target. So I'm going to go past third grade here for a second. Our fourth grade math is at 82% average to high, and our fifth grade at 81% average to high. Third grade is at 79%, and we really wish that was 80, but it is very, very, very close on here. So 66% of our third through fifth grade students showed average to high growth in NWEA math. So as students move into here, we are seeing, like with iReady, we are seeing our students performing particularly well. Our cohort data looks better for our fourth grade. It's pretty much the same when it comes to NWEA. We have our fourth grade cohort looks great with a 6-point increase from the spring. But, again, always wanting to see where we can continue to push our kids. That third grade was almost there. So that would have been, I guess, the trifecta. Okay, so here are the results for our middle school reading. We see sixth grade ended the year with a 78% average to high result in this. And they did decrease their high risk, or excuse me, I knew I was going to do that. They did decrease their low quintile for the students. And just to give you a little bit of context, the way NWEA has quintiles, the fact that they even have quintiles, if you think about it, of all the students in their pool that take a particular assessment, students would be 20% in low, 20% in low average, 20% in average, 20% in high average, and 20% in high. That's how they span them out. So we always want to beat what they are. So if 60% of students on NWEA, when they do a norming and they're setting their quintiles, are in the average to high, we always want to be at Lindbergh, we want to be much higher. So we expect 80%, where if you think about what NWEA would have with their norms and how they would spread the students out, it would be 60%. Does that make a little bit of sense? Okay, all right, and the same with growth. All right, so the sixth grade cohort, as you can see up there, is pretty much the same from their fourth grade year. And we do see some increase within our seventh grade. In reading, though, in eighth grade, definitely love looking at that cohort. That looks that's fun to look at, to see those students making that growth from the time that we started to where they are there. Again, with the reading, the students did very similar on all the different subtests that are in there, but with NWEA, there is definitely an opportunity to look at student groups and demographics on how our students are performing. All right, so now we're going to get into math. So we see that we are averaging about 73% 6th through 8th grade on the number of our students who are meeting or exceeding our targets. We really want this to be in the 80s, similar to our reading. Our reading, we're just really pleased with our performance data in our reading, and we would love to see that our math is getting there. Already went through some of the things that we're going to be investing in to help support. So we're in the middle of a math curriculum rewrite this year, which is much needed, emphasis in math content, specific professional learning, all of those good things, and digging into our student groups to help make sure that they are growing. But I do see that 6th grade, 71% at the end of the year, on target, 7th grade, 75%, and 8th grade. I don't want to sell the work short. I think that when it comes to mathematics and in doing some comparison to other districts that maybe use NWEA, especially because I have a little bit more insight into the SRSN network, we set very high goals, and we want to be there because that's where we want to be. Definitely think we're still above the average when you look at things from the national level, but really, really want to see those get into the 80s. We would like to see that. So just with that understanding, I think the one thing, the grimmest picture on this particular slide is the cohort data, trying to look at the rhyme and reason and patterns behind all those things. We just do see that dip in the cohort along the way. So we really want to, again, see what we can do to continue to stretch our kids, challenge our kids, make sure they're making those particular gains. All right, let's leave that one behind. Okay, English 1 and Algebra 1. English 1, this is really great for our high school. These are all 9th grade students that are participating in this. You can see that they start in the chart up at the top. You can see in the fall they were at 82% and moved to 85%. Definitely decreasing the amount of students who are in the red, which is considered the low quintile on here. When you look at Algebra 1 from the fall to the spring, we do see a slight increase from 61% to 62%. This is not the same as how English 1 is. Algebra 1 does include students in 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade. So the majority of the students are freshmen, but there are quite a few that are in the upper grades. And so we no longer, when we're looking at it at the freshman level, have students who are in math advanced coursework included in this particular assessment. But when you're looking at 8th grade, that does include our Algebra 1 scores as well. So just to give you an idea, that trajectory in the English 1 cohort is also very fun to look at. I think there's 18 points increase from the beginning of when the students took it till now. So definitely love looking at that. We do see the cohort data I have for you in the algebra is a bit of a stretch. So I just wanted to point that out and make sure that everybody is aware that I know it's a stretch too. It's not a true cohort because when the students get to 9th grade, they're no longer in there. So I just wanted to make sure. You'll see that number says 72% of our students in 9th grade are on hitting our target. But if you look at the bar chart, it's those quintiles of our target add up to 62%. So those numbers will differ. So I just wanted to give you a little bit of an idea of that cohort and why it looks like that.
So just to clarify, when you're talking about like the 9th grade Algebra 1, you have a lot of 9th graders who are taking honors geometry or geometry, so they're, you would assume, above grade level because they're taking a course above, but they're not included in this
Not
graph.
in this. This is only 9th grade students who are taking an algebra course.
And is it also 8th grade students who are taking algebra? No,
Not-
that's just the EOC.
So when you look at this cohort data and you look at 8th grade spring 2024, that does include kids who are taking algebra in 8th grade. When we go to the 9th grade cohort, that no longer includes those students. So the fact that that number stays the same when we've pulled out all of our advanced kids is in itself really noteworthy and positive data.
Is it fair, and this might not be fair, tell me if it's not, is it fair to say that this just underscores that middle school math needs help? Because by the time they get to high school, you've taken the kids who are advanced out and they're at 72%, so that's actually kind of good. But the kids who were doing advanced work in 8th grade are still only at 72%, and that's not great.
So what I will share with you is that we need to dig in because there's a lot of inconsistencies in our data. So last year, our NWEA math data was stronger than it is this year. But if you look at our MAP data, we've just gotten MAP data released, that is flipped from state testing. So we are trying to figure out what is happening there. Do we think there's something to investigate? Absolutely. Do we think we need support in math? Absolutely. But we don't know, we've got to drill down to what are those issues and what are those challenges and then start to mitigate that. As Jill mentioned earlier, the fact that we are in a curriculum revision cycle, this is the best time to, we've already been looking at the data prior to coming in and seeing this current year data. But this is the time to really say, okay, how do we strengthen? How do we increase rigor? How do we increase instructional support? Get the right resources. This is also the time we'll select resources for next year. So evaluate all of those things as a part of the whole package. But the inconsistencies in the math data is very intriguing to us.
So, and I know you guys have this data, it's just often not in our presentation. I'm kind of curious to see over time, like, for example, how 6th grade of different cohorts, does that make sense? Like, in 2001, 6th grade, the 22, or not 2001, sorry, 21, the 22, the 23, 6th grade, to see, like, are those kind of staying the same? Or are we seeing jumps where it is reliant on cohort? Or could it be maybe a change from grading practices or something like that too? Just, I don't know, just to see, like, is there a point in time where it did change or not?
So I will be glad to put that together for you. And so just to make sure I'm understanding what you're asking for, you just want to look at not cohorts of students, like how are 6th grade doing in 21, 22, or the school year 22, 23 school year, and just to see those particular patterns. Yeah, no, absolutely happy to put that together for you.
Like, is the curriculum, I'm sorry, like, you know, because then you could see like, oh, we have an issue with 6th grade, or in 7th grade, they start to pick back up, or something like that, I don't know.
And so I was looking for a particular pattern in that, and there are just so many, there's some anomalies in here that are just really like throwing me off on some particular things, but I'm happy to put that together. We can investigate that. I think, you know, there's probably several variables, you know, needs of students coming back from COVID, probably from the beginning years to now we should be well past that, not even referring to that any longer, but changes in teachers, changes in PLCs, all those particular things. What are those variables? So that is all really good information.
I can answer that question a little bit because if you go back and look at the last slide, the cohort data, you can see the 6th grade over a few years' time. So this year's sixth grade data is 71. We're in the 71% of our students were at average or above. Last year, the 24 data, that group was 83. So we do have a difference between those two cohorts. And then the current 8th grade class, when they were in 6th grade, or this last year's, they were at 70. So we have this very, strong fluctuation between at least those 3 years, for 6th grade specifically.
Do we watch to see that split? Because when you hit your freshman year, those that are in advanced math, they split off and they're no longer captured here. Do we measure that, like just the size of that population year over year to see, maybe you've got this one cohort that moved through that just had a whole lot of math whizzes in it, right? And they moved on to that higher level math, and it would give you opposite indications in your metrics as you measure that way.
I would say there's not any significant fluctuation. I mean, we can go back and look at it, but just thinking about the number of sections of classes that happen, now we could have a, larger class size and specific, but we tend to have a similar number of sections for those advanced classes from year to year.
So you're fairly confident that it normalizes?
We can run the numbers, but just off of anecdotal memory, I would say it's pretty consistent.
I have another question, I'm sorry. We did talk about how Algebra 1 with the different, some take it, some don't. For example, if you have your 6th graders who are advanced math, are they taking then the 6th, or are they taking the 7th grade?
So really
Or
interesting.
is it just because it's NWA, it does the
You're right. You
Okay.
just got it. So NWEA is adaptive. So it's called 6+. So it's 6th through 12th grade. All right. We can go ahead and flip. So here, I just added this slide this year to just show big picture satellite view of how we are doing as a district. Our compass goal in the teaching and learning is that 80% of our students are performing, 82% of our students are in the average to high for performance, and 70% are in the average to high for growth. For reading, we're at 82%. So this is just kind of a summation of everything that I've gone over, only looking at those spring results. And so I highlighted those, bold those in green if the grades made it. And you can see almost did in almost every grade for reading. The work our teachers are doing, the work our administrators are doing, Dr. Volter, all those who are, diving into our literacy, it's definitely having some strong impact for our particular students. 6th grade's not there, but they're not so far off that it's, they're just not there, but they're not that far off. Now, growth, we do have 65% of our students in the average to high quintile. We do want that to be 70. It's never been 70. It's always been around anywhere between, I want to say 62 to 66.
I think when we first started
tracking.
tracking it and we made this goal, we were at 60 and 62% for growth. And we said we can do better than that. So hitting 65 is moving in the right trajectory, but yeah, we haven't made that stretch goal yet.
Do you know off the top of your head what the national average is in that space? I'm just wondering where our goals and our targets are sitting as compared to.
So when I called in WEA on that particular how many students will meet growth, they said, when you look at our pool, 50% of your
it's
students
that
will
50,
and
okay.
50% of your students won't. Right. Yeah. No, I do want to point out that 8th grade, they made it. We got to celebrate that 8th grade reading, and we have some other grade levels that are close, but not there. Yeah. Okay, so we're gonna get into a little bit of our student group data. So this is just something I put together more for, the visual's not the best. It's really just meant to be like a view of it. I know it's hard to see all the numbers, so I put the chart at the bottom of this particular line graph. So if you look at the top, if you're looking at this particular line graph, you're going to see a solid color of navy blue. To me, it's navy blue. It might be another color on your screen, but the solid color is what you're looking at. That is our total population over time from 2022 to 2025. And then you will see student groups such as special education, ML representing multilingual learners, FR representing free reduced, and gifted. So what we're trying to do is see how close are we, or how far apart are we when we're looking at our performance gap for these particular things. Because the numbers are so hard to read within this chart sometimes. If you take a look at the table below, if you looked at it from the top to the bottom within each column, you'll be able to see from 2022 to 2025. So you can see, okay, which student groups are we seeing some growth in and which ones are we not? So starting to the first category, which is total in that table, you can see that in 2022, our total was 72, and in 2025, 82. So pretty good district trajectory over time, right? So if we look at special education, we can see that definitely still a gap there. They were at 52% of their students hitting that target in 2022, and now at 58%. But we do see it going in a positive direction towards reading. We're going to continue to see that grow. And for multilingual learners, not seeing the same kind of trajectory, but I definitely think it's fair to point out that there's our most transient population. And so within many of these, students are coming in and out. So I didn't pull only students that have been here for the whole time, because this is the status of who we have at these particular times. Looking at our free reduced, this is one to really celebrate that closing of the gap over the trajectory is going in a positive direction, and closing that gap from 2022 to 2025. So definitely an area to celebrate. And Gifted, they grew, but they're always going to be above.
I have a question. Are some students counted more than once in this graph?
Yes, Jen, thank you so much for saying that, because I wanted to point that out. So I really appreciate you. Okay, so yes, there could be students are duplicate in this. So I'm just taking a percentage of the whole of who's in these particular student groups, which is, I think, still great to look at. And so there could be a student that's in special education, a multilingual learner, and free reduce. And that could be, so that student may be represented in this performance over time. We still want to see those gaps close. So, but no, that is a really good point.
And when we were talking earlier about looking at math data and saying like, oh, this is a spot that we want to focus on. So if we're looking at this type of data in these specific student groups, how are we also bringing that into the fold and questioning like, okay, what practices need to change to get these students back up and with professional development and things? Are those conversations, I know we've continued to have them all the time. Just wondering if there's been anything specific that you guys have been digging into with this.
Well, absolutely. I work very closely with Dr. Doyle with Special School District in regards to special education. And I know that Dr. Sparks works really closely with our multilingual learners. And of course, not that every student that is on free reduce is on my caseload, but making sure that students are all getting what they need, and in Title I services for our early learners, and Dr. Bednarik with our gifted students. So I think that we're always looking at things that we can improve. So I have a couple, I'm gonna try to answer your question, but I have a couple different things. The most important thing is looking at really getting consistent evidence-based, whether it's strategies or programs, in the hands of our teachers who are supporting students that fall into these particular groups, to make sure that they're really getting great stuff. We've been really emphasizing the importance of making sure that all students means all students, and that's like the big message. We believe that all students can learn at high levels. We've been really trying to tear away the kind of some of the mindset that, well, the student is special education, and so they will get their services by special education teachers, and instead saying this is a general education student who receives special education services, and the general education teacher and the special education teacher will work collaboratively to help support the student and make sure they're getting what they need. Because we know that if we're always supporting students outside of the Tier 1 instruction, and we're building them up, they're always going to be behind, because as our students move up, they will move up too, but they will not move up at the same pace. So we're trying to close that gap, which we believe really more is an instructional gap. So then it is a performance and achievement gap. It's like, are the kids getting the instruction? Are they getting exposure to the standards that they need to have? So there's a lot of things happening. Another thing that we're doing, and we really started this year, and I think that it is showing It's not as fast, but it is showing some impact. Is at every one of our administrative leadership meetings, we start our meetings with data. And so we have a data calendar that pinpoints exactly what data we're going to be talking about. We're always looking at our data from not just the total population, but also looking at it with our student groups. I'm sorry, I'm staring at you. Like with our student groups as well. And so making sure that not only are we modeling it, but they're also doing it, administrators, and then taking that back into their buildings and modeling it within their buildings. That's something we really focus in on this year because we saw some of these similar results last year when we did the same achievement and growth report, and so that was something we really wanted to dig in for this year, and we really have. And I do think that it is having a positive impact. It's just taking that time to make sure that it gets all the way through. But I think the biggest thing that we can do is make sure that all means all, that all kids are getting exposure to grade level standards, that we are supporting the students in every need, and that we are looking at our particular student groups at all times to see who's in and who's out. And so that's what we really want to see at all particular times. Okay, did I answer or kind of, or?
Okay, I have two questions. One, for the total population, that is everybody all together, right?
Everyone.
So is there a way to put a line here for like no group as well, just so we could see? Because that's averaged and there's really nothing to monitor the people who are in nothing. Yeah, like subtract it out. So you see, because this averages, it's going between two extremes. And so I'd like to see just where's everybody else too, in any group. And then I also I really think that increase in the free and reduced lunch is really something amazing. Is there any analysis on what happened? Like, why did we do so great? Because then could we repeat it somewhere else?
We were having this conversation. Part of it is, we were wondering, what does it mean in terms of how our district demographic is changing? I don't think that answers this question. To be quite frank, we had about 14% free and reduced lunch, and we have reduced to 12%, but that doesn't account for this. So we were processing through that same part. I think it has more to do with the intentionality of looking at data. I want to remind you back when we were looking at the Compass in March as well, or maybe that was April. Having data tracking is a part of our Compass goals, and making that a part of our regular cadence of the work that we do just elevates the conversation about how are we supporting kids, how are we analyzing, because it is very common within school districts to be data rich and analysis poor, right? So we've really leveled up the ability to analyze what is that data telling us and what are we going to do to change the instruction. So I think in that particular case, you're talking about a group of students who are in the general population. It's not about a program specifically. So for instance, for the multilingual learners, we invested in some additional programming and some resources that would help support when they are seeing their English language specialist. Similarly to students with IEPs, you get very programmatically specific things. When we're talking about students in the free and reduced lunch population, there's not an additional program if you are a student with free and reduced lunch. So that to me is a positive symptom of having done that work.
Okay, I'm gonna go into demographic. All right, so here we're still on our reading. That line is a little thinner here, but please look at the table. The line was just to kind of do a visual for seeing where that particular gap is. Again, if you look at the columns from top to bottom, you'll see 2022 down to 2025. And so we do see the gap closing here for many of our different student groups, but not for our Black student population and also for our Hispanic student population. Still definitely some work. Do want to acknowledge that from 2022 to 2025, definitely seeing a positive trajectory, but the gap is still 20 percentage point gap, and so definitely continuing to do some of that work. So we do have, between the two charts that we shared, we have 3 groups that are showing the best results of closing those gaps, where the 2 or more races, free, reduced, and we do see our Black student population closing that gap, moving in the right direction, but definitely still a pretty wide gap. Okay, let's take a look at math quickly here, since you've already seen what I've done here, I can move through this one pretty fast. So 75% of our students were in the average to high. We did not meet this particular goal, which was set at 80%. 62% of our students made average to high growth between fall and spring. Again, set a very ambitious goal of 70, even though we weren't necessarily close to that, but really wanting to get to it. And we see that our fourth grade did, which I want to say historically, fourth grade has done really well in mathematics in our district. So we need to just go in and just steal everything they're doing, because historically it's been a very great grade for our results. Okay, so I'm going to move past this one. Oh, did anybody have a question?
I had one other question. Algebra 1 is the last required math class, right? Mm-hmm. So like if you just hate math, once you make it through Algebra 1, you're done. You don't have to.
No,
Oh, I
students
thought
have
you
to
meant
go
on
on
the
to,
NWA.
they need 3 credits to graduate, so that would get students on a trajectory if they take a longer time with algebra to still need to take geometry as well.
It's just
Okay.
not tested.
Yeah,
Correct.
I was trying to figure out where that lands. Okay.
Not as a course level for NWEA on the district level, but I mean, depending on a student's trajectory or their where they're going in their math, if they take algebra in 8th grade, they have to take geometry, EOC on the state test at the high school. They have to, and then algebra 2 at the high school. They have to have a high school algebra score. So if they take algebra 1 EOC in middle school, they have to take an algebra EOC at the high school of algebra 2. But we have to show geometry. We have to show some, I guess, that they're testing all the way to that level.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right. So very similar. We're seeing those gaps between our total population and our particular student groups. We have seen the growth from in our total population from 69% of our students in the average or high in 2022 to the spring, and we are seeing some growth with our free reduced. Definitely still something to celebrate, but we're definitely still seeing that increase in our students, especially with special education, 28%. Special education, like Lindbergh, we have to do some deep dive into our professional learning and our supports in mathematics as well. So we can celebrate free reduce on that one. Let's move into our demographic. Looking at that total population over time from 69% to 75%, we do start to see those gaps narrow, but again, our Black student population is definitely needing support and a deeper dive into how we can close that gap and help support our students.
Dr. Sparks, could you, like, either in a Friday packet or at another board meeting, provide us with information on, like, what is our plan to address these gaps and work on them?
I'm happy to, yeah. It is part of our compass, so I can summarize that. And then, as I said before, it's really part of the MTSS systems and just diving down into those individual students.
Do we also especially since we're doing math curriculum right now, like, is it a piece of that as well when we're rewriting curriculum?
It really a lot of times it comes up more in curricular resources when you're trying to see how you're gonna implement the curriculum. I mean, the curriculum are the standards that we want students to attain. It's the resources are what we will do to help get them there. So as we start to evaluate curriculum resources, that'll definitely be part of the conversation.
Thank you.
You're welcome. But I'm happy to also summarize.
And just to follow up with that, I think it's a lot of continuation of supporting modeling what we're expecting to see, how we're looking at our data with our building administrators as well, and they really are. Like, the growth in what I'm seeing with all the work that we're doing, the collaborative conversations, is amazing. It's also building level administrators going back to their classrooms and working with their PLCs and saying, let's take a look at our students. And of our students, who's almost there, how can we help continue to move them? Who needs a little bit of support? Who needs a whole lot of support? And how are we gonna get that for each and every student? So it's really about having these data conversations with our teachers on identifying where kids are, doing we call the root cause analysis of what they particularly need. All right. We're gonna move on to our destination learners. We had our early learners. This one will go a lot faster because I told Dr. Lake 10 minutes and I've exceeded that. All right, so, which was a joke. Okay, so we had our early learners, we're moving into our advancing learners, and we're now getting into our destination learners and getting ready to prepare our students for college and career. So I definitely don't want the message to be that we just stop testing after a certain level, but the tests and what the students need to go on to the next level changes. And so it's really more about how are we setting you up for your future and what you're gonna do post-secondary. So that's where we're gonna go next. The class of 2025 ACT results will be sent to you in the fall. So we'll skip that one. Okay, so let's get to our assessments for our juniors. So as part of our individual career and academic plan that we call the ICAP, we ask our juniors to sign up for one of 3 assessments. So they choose the assessment that is right for them and going to help support whatever their post-secondary goals are. So this year, we used to do ACT for every junior. We stopped doing it, it's back. All right, so we have ACT for juniors. We had about 409 students participate in it. We had more students sign up for it. Quite a few did not show. I would say somewhere between 23 did not show up on that particular day. And it may have been, they might have been forced to sign up for it, but they really, really didn't want to, or they just truly, genuinely were not there. So either way. So the students were given the opportunity to either do ACT, AccuPlacer, or ASVAB. And because every year somebody asked me what ASVAB stands for, I wrote it out for you because I will never, ever remember exactly what it is. But although ACT and AccuPlacer is provided for our juniors, ASVAB we will allow any student who wants to sign up for that at any particular time. So that 35 number represents students in 10th, 11th, and 12th grade who take this. And the military representatives come and assess that particular, or administer that particular assessment. I want to say that 84% of our juniors have participated in one of these 3 assessments so far. So we would love to see that grow to 95%, but this was our very first year doing it. And it does take a lot of manpower to administer this particular, and the amount of students who are receiving accommodations, rightfully so, well-deserved accommodations, still takes a lot of manpower to make sure that they're getting small group, one-on-one, and those particular things. So it's not, it's a great thing to do for our kids, well worth it. We'll do it 1,000 times, but I just really want to acknowledge all the teachers, administrators, Miranda Galvin, honors coordinator, everybody that put in a lot of this work to get this all done. Okay, so goal in the future is to get to that 95%. But looking at our juniors, these are only juniors, so please don't let this, I don't want this to be taken as our district cohort class of 2025. So 409 participants, 74% of the juniors chose ACT and actually showed up and participated in this particular one. And we had 5 perfect scores for our juniors. So that's really amazing to learn. Our composite as a whole was 22, and you can see the breakdown in those different particular subtests over there in math, science, English, and reading. We know that ACT is going to change a bit for next year, so we'll have some additional information for you as we get all of those logistics worked out. I believe it's going to be shortened. Science is not going to be a subtest any longer or optional. All right, so just to give you that 22, this was the first try for many of our students that have never taken the ACT before, and it was likely an opportunity where students maybe would not have taken it, but did because it was a free opportunity for them. Any questions on ACT? Okay. Moving into advanced placement, I'm going to give you, again, a satellite overview of all this particular information, but Miranda Galvin and a high school team will come in and give you a more thorough dive into this as they get into their program evaluation for honors. So you'll get more information on this. So very exciting to share that in 2025, 92% of our total AP students scored a 3 or higher. This is extremely exciting. That's a 21-point increase from 2021. So definitely something to celebrate. We saw in 2025, 625 students participate and take an AP exam. That's in 2021, you see 451. That's a 38% increase over that time of our students participating. We see the number of exams in 2025, 1,281. That was 803 in 2021. That's a 59% increase in the number of exams that are taken. So we are just really seeing a lot of exciting information here. If you look at the percentage of exams passed over the past 5 years, in 2025, 89% of our assessments taken were students passed for this particular year. So we have some really exciting things. So even with the significantly more exams taken, the pass rate continues to rise. And this shows both quality and scale. And with the 89% of all exams passed in 2025, it's clear that students not only are enrolling in AP courses, but are also, they're being well prepared. So that is really something exciting to see. And what a great thing that I get to see here and share the awesome work of our teachers who actually get the kids there. So that's what an honor for me.
Does past include scores of 1 and 2?
No,
No.
3 or higher.
A pass score is 3 or higher, which means that they are guaranteed in-state college credit for those courses.
So I don't understand why these numbers don't match.
The first one in the upper right quadrant is, if I am a student, I might have taken 3 tests.
Okay.
But I have passed at least one of them. So 92% of our students passed at least one
Oh,
AP
okay.
test. And then the bottom section
exams,
is
not the
the number of
student.
individual tests.
Thank you.
Okay, so here's 7 courses that our students participated in that all the students received passing scores in. So just wanting to highlight, there's about 32 advanced placement courses courses that the students took exams in, and here's 7 all passing. So very exciting. Pre-calculus is that first one. So again, no pattern in math. No pattern in how we look at our math performance. It's crazy. Okay, so top 5 AP exams. I just wanted to throw this in here. Here's the things that our kids are going for the most and feel very confident in. Or at least are taking a risk in. Okay, and the moment you've all been waiting for, the end. So I am finished and I'm happy to take any questions. I did hear an hour, so I was a little over, so I apologize for that.
I don't have any questions, but I know that this district gathers a lot of data, and I just want to thank you for all of your time, effort, and care that you've put into making all of this digestible for us, because it is a lot, but I just want to applaud you and thank you for doing it.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
And thanks for answering all my questions.
You guys had great questions, and I love that it's a back and forth kind of dialogue and we're engaging. It makes the data so much more interactive, so I really appreciate that so much.
All right, I think we're ready. No, you want me to start singing? You don't want that? No, I don't. All right, legislative updates. Tara, you're up first, I believe.
I am, if Colin can go to the next slide. So Senate Bill 68 has a number of provisions that impact each of our different areas. So I'm gonna just quickly summarize the teaching and learning side of that. I will also kind of put off to the side, there's another Senate bill that I didn't include in the slide deck, but for you to be aware of that now gives students who are homeschooled within our district access to extracurricular activities. That's not really something that we have in the past kept students from participating in. We have had certain incidences where we've had homeschooled students participating, and we have a method and a mechanism to allow that to happen. This will result in is increased communication out to our community about what opportunities are available. So while it won't really change our practices of allowing students who are not enrolled in attending in Lindbergh to participate, it will increase our communication to our community about what opportunities exist. And then we have Senate Bill 68. One of the probably most impactful components of this is that very first bullet. There is a provision in the law that says students may not use their electronic personal communication devices throughout the school day. That means bell to bell. Now, the reality is we've already taken significant steps over the last few years to limit student, we'll just say cell phone use, right? Technically, this includes tablets, this includes Apple Watches, et cetera. But most of the time, the way we see this practically implemented is with cell phones. And we have not had cell phones in classrooms or able to be out during class for the last couple of years. One of our middle schools has actually not had it during lunch as well. So really the biggest change will be the hallway behavior, the lunch behavior, specifically in the during power lunch at the high school. We've already started working with our secondary principals to outline what are the procedures going to look like. You'll notice in our board meeting tonight, there's a first reading around policy related to this. So we're using that policy to guide our work and our communication with families. So this is going to be one that students will definitely feel the impact of. One of the main purposes of Senate Bill 68 is to create a safe and distraction-free school environment. So this is that distraction-free side of what the Senate bill is trying to achieve. Any questions about that?
Does that also include, let's say, so we have Chromebooks for our students at the high school, so if I have my own personal PC, does that include me not being able to bring my personal PC to the classroom as well?
Unless a teacher says that personal PC would be in place for an instructional purpose, which I cannot imagine. There are exceptions within the policy that allow us to determine what constitutes an emergency that students would be able to use their devices. So I can't imagine your personal laptop would fit under that. And then there's also an exception for instructional purposes, right? So we provide tablets and we provide Chromebooks to students. Obviously, we're planning to use those for instructional purposes, which is why there are exceptions for those. If there were a random situation where a student needed to use their own device, maybe because they had a 504 accommodation or something else, then we would work through that as well. That would fall under an exception.
When is our target date, I guess, to know what the plan is going to look like for, I'm thinking mostly the secondary schools, but, and then I know and you just mentioned there are exceptions, I would assume we're taking into consideration how we're going to communicate that out, because there could be I'm thinking there could be some students that don't maybe have IEPs or 504s who will need it now to
Correct.
be able to listen to calming music and that sort of thing. So what's our communication going to be like with that?
So we actually have a meeting scheduled for July 30th. Where we have a draft that we've already put out and everybody's looking at it, and we're having that conversation on July 30th. So in the back to school communications, we'll be able to share what what that messaging is. But you are correct, there will be the unanticipated consequence of additional 504s for students who have need of any accommodations with technology. And we are anticipating that.
And how are we working with our staff? I know our policy's coming up, but just a general question. The student walks in or refuses, like, what happens here?
Well, the good news is our staff is already used to this because we've been doing it for the last few years in terms of what's happening in the classroom. The change is going to be how are we engaging with students in the hallway? How are we engaging with students when I'm supervising power lunch? The trick to that is going to be I, as a English teacher, doing supervision duty over power lunch, I don't know who has an exception and who does not. So that is why we're working through those procedural components. How are we going to respond in situations? We do not want this to become a power struggle with students. We don't want this to erode relationships with students. So it is going to be really important that we are reminding students of what the expectations are and holding them to a high standard without putting our teachers in a position or our students are in a position where they have to explain any potential exceptions or have information about students that really is not relevant in any other circumstance.
Yeah.
So that's all part of those procedural components that we're working through. I will say that we did ask attorneys about that question and specifically about power lunch. And, you know, their response was really focus on it when it becomes, you know, an issue, when there's another policy infraction. So if the result of the student being on their device is bullying or harassment, or now we have an academic distraction, that's when we'd want to take it, you know, kind of level up the consequences. But there's a lot of ways to politely remind students of what expectations are without having that negative interaction.
Is this a building expectation or a campus expectation? I'm just thinking about, you know, I walk outside for whatever time.
It would be during the school day specifically,
So it's
yes.
bell
So
to
thank you
bell,
for
even in the
clarifying that,
parking
because I was
lot.
trying to understand what you were asking. Yes, so if I'm outside in the courtyard, yes, it still has the same expectation. It's bell to bell.
Fair enough.
Can they have it in their backpack, or is it not
campus.
on their person?
They can have it in their backpack. There will be some schools who will choose to do that is not a conversation we are having. Especially because if we're saying that there are emergency exceptions, if students don't have access to even grab it in an emergency, then we are actually not supporting our own procedures that we develop.
Are we going to have, or could we consider having different check-in points with staff throughout the year with, hey, how is this going? Instead of anyway.
Absolutely, yeah. I think that, you know, this is gonna be a shock to not just Lindbergh's system, but school systems around the state. And so there are definitely gonna be some ongoing challenges with implementation and then how we problem solve through that and try, again, we wanna work with our kids and have the school experience be a positive one, but also help them understand that there are limits to what they should have access to.
I think this one's gonna require additional communication. It's gonna need a focused communication out to the community. Because parents are gonna be as frustrated as the students are. They have parents that are accustomed to being able to just shoot a quick text message and get an answer between.
Absolutely. And, you know, this is a case where it helps us that it's already starting to be trickled out in the news cycles. So I have not had anything kind of trickle up to me about concerns that parents are already having. I think that, but we definitely hear the rumors out there and the
I just wanna
rumors.
make sure that we're highlighting that this isn't a Lindbergh
Correct.
decision. This is a state of Missouri decision, and that's who you need to go.
Absolutely,
You need to voice your concern too.
yes.
We can give you those numbers.
Yeah. And I think originally.
So good, because usually people are saying that's who voice their concern to me. I get to say, voice your concern to somebody else.
I think originally the bill started where it was set up like what we have currently. And then as it moved through House and Senate, and they changed it.
Well, and I think it's important too that, I mean, and this is factual, Christy and I attended a legislative South County, and one of our representatives asked the question of the school board presidents and the superintendents, do you want us to get involved with this? And it was resounding in that room, let it be a local decision. We're already doing things, we're limiting the use, it works for us, and they all said in that room, sure, sounds good to us. But obviously, that's not the way it played out. It got tacked onto the big omnibus bill, and that's what happens sometimes, so.
I'd say on the plus side, at least it's an everybody's in this together situation, because I understand the problem that they're trying to address. I understand it, and it is a problem that can't be addressed unless everybody acts together. So at least there's that, but I think it is gonna be very difficult, and enforcement's gonna be very hard, and good luck.
I actually have a question along those lines. I need to look, and maybe this is to public schools. There's no mechanism to hold a private school to.
Yeah, I haven't delved into that.
I'm just curious if
Yeah.
that. Okay.
So moving on to the other components that impact teaching and learning, the MAP results are now going to have, right now we have proficient and advanced is always our goal for students to achieve on the state assessments. And then below that are basic and below basic. There's going to be a mid-range added that is grade level equivalence. We've talked about this for quite a while, that students who earn basic on their state MAP MAP assessments are often on grade level, but that's kind of hidden within that basic, and it makes it seem like students are doing below grade level work when they're classified as basic because proficient is our benchmark as a state. So,
Well, and I would say on that basic, it's kind of the top third. It's not every student in
Right.
basic, but we've been saying that for a while. Those kids that are kind of right there at the top of basic they're doing just fine. And we've been saying that for, because we have other data points that say they're doing fine. It's just they're kind of right there. So this is a positive, so.
but this will go into effect this school year. So the 2026 MAP test results will have this information if students are on grade level or not as well. Some additional things, we assess our students when we think that there is a behavior risk or a threat to student safety or a self-harm, if there's a potential suicide threat. So this is a practice that we've talked about. I love that this is a state level practice because I think it's very much in support of students, that when we have a student who transfers out of Lindbergh, that if they have had an assessment, either behavioral threat or suicide assessment, that assessment and any outcome such as a safety plan would become a part of their record going on to the next school. So that is a very good communication tool to make sure to support students in transition. Some other good things that came out of this is currently, when you are an early childhood student receiving special education services, many times those students are classified as young child with developmental delay. They're not getting a specific learning disability yet. And then they can retain that young child with developmental delay or YCD diagnosis into kindergarten while they're evaluated for school-age diagnosis. This extends that YCD diagnosis to be able to go into first grade as well. So if we have students who are still maybe having some slight delays but wouldn't qualify for a school-age level diagnosis, there are additional supports that can be in place for special education for them a little bit longer. And then lastly, just a great clerical thing that's going to help reduce some strain on our system. Students who are in MOCAP taking virtual courses now will have access to state assessments virtually as well. So we don't have to bring in students to take tests in person. So it's a great time saver for us during the testing season. There's some other things that kind of cross over from Joelle's world into mine, but she's going to address them, so I'll leave them with her.
Just so everybody's aware, we have about 35 minutes, so.
I've only got 4 or 5 slides to go through, so this will be quick. As Tara mentioned, this Senate Bill 68 was largely focused on safety and security, and some of the requirements, I'm happy to report Lindbergh's very much ahead of the game or right on track. So a few I've highlighted here. The Cardiac Emergency Response Plan, this is due to be in every building by 26-27. The Adam School Project is, I've printed this out so I can read it to you in case you don't know, but Project Adam, national nonprofit program founded in 1999 at Children's Hospital. The mission is to prevent sudden cardiac death in children and adolescents by equipping schools and communities with response plans to respond to cardiac emergencies. This includes placement of AEDs, automated external defibrillators, and providing CPR training and helping schools develop cardiac emergency plans. It was named after Adam Liemel, who died from a sudden cardiac arrest during a basketball game. We already have 2 Project Adam Heart Safe schools, Lindbergh High School and Truman Middle School, and every building will use the Project Adam template to develop their cardiac emergency plans. The Adam Safe school designation is above what the state will require, but we anticipate most of our schools will want to do that. We've already got 2 that have that designation. We'll use the same criteria for our plans, so it won't be much more just to have the Adam project designation for each of our schools, so that's really terrific. Stop the Bleed Act, last year, thanks to Randy Jimerson and Jamie Cavato, who was in here a while ago, they worked to have all of our employees trained based on the Stop the Bleed Act. And so we're already done with that. We've got plans in place to train any new employees, but that piece, which is going to be a pretty heavy lift for districts, I think, has already been completed at Lindbergh, so that's great news. On the security side, Emergency response plans already exist in every building. Again, last year, we reviewed all of those and made sure that they were where they needed to be. Jason Brown will be meeting with every principal to, again, review those this summer, but that is already in place. Active shooter response training, the difference here is that it will now need to take place annually in every building, and that's not currently something that we do, but it certainly will be, and we'll meet that standard. That, again, doesn't start until the 26-27 school year. Courage to Report training, that system we are a part of. It's a confidential reporting tool to make schools safer in Missouri, allows anyone, students, parents, school personnel, concerned citizens to anonymously report potential dangers to schools to the Missouri Highway Patrol. We're part of the C2C system, and we already provide training to our leaders in that system. A couple other things I would mention that Lindbergh has in place already. Every building has AED machines, and these are checked regularly by nurses. From a CPR training standpoint, let me find where this is. All nurses, health room assistants, varsity coaches, trainers, and PE teachers are already required to have CPR certified. So as we build our cardiac response plans, we will already have the personnel trained in place. So it's really just putting the plans together. And we will have an alternate year training schedule for staff to be trained in CPR. The certification's good for 2 years, so we'll build in a cadence where it's every other year, half the staff. And Jessie and her team will be providing that. So we're in a good place with regard to Senate Bill 68, and we'll continue to monitor this.
I do think, just a quick note that Brian didn't have in there, we've already done it, but the filming on windows, they provided money for that. Unfortunately, we can't get reimbursed. I did ask that question, but that is another thing. So what I think in this safety and security, what you see is now it's what we've done here proactively is now being recommended and suggested statewide, so.
Joelle, is there any funds, or Brian, any funds coming to districts who don't have these things in place?
Yes, and the Senate Bill 68 says that state allocation depended on, like Stop the Bleed, for instance, you get kits, and they're not, we got a grant for ours and we already own them, so, but if a school doesn't have funding for Stop the Bleed, they're not gonna be required to do it unless they're provided money to purchase the materials. Several of the things, and Joel can chime in here, but several of the things, at least on safety security side, were it's stipulated that allocations have to occur before they'll be required to have these things in place.
Okay, cool, thank you.
Oh, yes, sorry, I'm done.
Okay, got to be real quick. I agree with you on that. I'm Brian. On some that affect finance and facilities, I'll go real quick. The first one's about get the lead out, very minor tweaks. Scott already has that. There's not going to be any impact. They've just made some tweaks to the legislation. The second one is good for us. It's that students that are suspended or expelled can still be counted for attendance. We're already working with Michelle McRoy on that data, how we're tracking that, but in the past, we have not been counting those students in the attendance. So I know we don't have a lot of expelled and suspended kids, but anything that we get more attendance hours is great. So that's a positive. The next one is about the 169 days and a minimum. And if you do that, there's not a negative impact when you have more weather days than you have built in your calendar. So if we ever had to use that, that would be a positive impact for us. We won't be penalized if we put that into play. Tara and I have already been working on that with the state since the last few months, so we're ahead of the game on that one. The next one is about allowing contracted employees to have their children come to our district, and we're also ahead of the game on that one, and there's not a budget impact. Other items I just want to mention that weren't in Senate Bill 68 but are important for finance is the change to the formula that, and I put this in my budget message as well, that this year we are going to be able to be paid on 10% of our average enrollment. So they'll look at the February enrollment and the September enrollment. We'll average those two, and then take 10%, and that will be part of the formula calculation now, just not solely on attendance. So they're looking at more at, they understand enrollment is important, not just attendance. And that phases in each year, as you can see, all the way down into 2030. So they're looking at enrollment more than attendance, which is great because of what we've been seeing since COVID. And then finally, just a reminder, again, I put this in my budget message, that they are looking at the current formula. We haven't had too many changes in the formula over the last 30 years. I think it's been done twice. They're looking at that, and they're looking at a plan with recommendations to be put out by December 1st of '26. So,
I was surprised to see this happen so quickly.
yeah, I
I
was
just
too.
remember in the spring, we went to Ed Plus meeting and they were talking about, we need to have it, we need to have the, you know, the formula redone, or changed, and I was surprised to see that
it's
first
already-
meeting was in June.
Yep.
So
Yeah,
that's
they're
good.
in it, they're doing it, yep.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay, that's all I have.
All right, well, as we welcome Dr. Tracy Bednarik-Humes up to talk about our gifted identification updates, I just want to let you know that this is a precursor for what you see in the board meeting tonight as a first reading on the procedures for identifying our gifted students. There's also a policy update that is all related to the work that she's going to share with you now.
And I was mentally preparing to try to get this done in 10 minutes, but a half an hour will be more than enough time. So thank you for having me here, and I'm really excited to share the work that we've put into this. The updates that I'm going to share are primarily focused on identifying students for LEAP, but at Lindbergh, being identified for qualifying for LEAP is the first step in the PEGS process, so it does tie together. During my time here, believe it or not, this is year 7 that I'm going into. We've always been very intentional about trying to cast the widest net as possible to equitably identify students who may need gifted programming. And while we've experienced success, there's always been some room for improvement, particularly for our high achieving students that are maybe not quite at that 95th percentile, but are really close, and considering the possibility of would they qualify for gifted programming as well. So I think this proposal particularly opens up pathways for those students, as well as addresses the whole picture for our gifted identification process. So to start, we did have an amazing committee that did this work. The work was started and a committee was formed because in November of 2024, the state put out new gifted identification guidelines. And one of the key differences from our current policy, where we looked at 3 components and then used 2 of those components to really be those primary qualification criteria, the academic achievement, or for our second graders, a logical reasoning component, and then the IQ component. The state now is pushing to, is now requiring that we look at 4 components for every child, and that a child must qualify in 3 of those 4 components in order to qualify for gifted programming. So that would be academic ability, general mental ability, which is often referred to as an IQ, but depending on the test, it might not be like your traditional IQ. A creativity, reasoning, or problem-solving ability assessment, and then an other, which you can determine at the district level. So it could be a creativity assessment, it could be MAP scores, it could be a portfolio or a rating scale, a gifted rating scale. So there's some room for choice there.
I have a quick question.
Yes.
So could 3 of those 4 be not the IQ test?
No, the IQ does. So the general mental ability does have to be one of those components. So good question. We should probably bold print that. So our committee was formed with teachers, a school psychologist, parents, administrators, board members, and community members. We had 6 meetings. We started with looking at our current policy at Lindbergh, and then the new DESE guidelines. And then we heard presentations from Rockwood, Ladue, and Parkway on their process of updating their identification policy as well. And looking at what those different districts did was very helpful as we put together our draft proposal for your review. So we'll go on to the next slide so we can look at the proposal. And it's pretty content heavy, so this is a first read. If you want to dig into this more at any point, I am more than happy to meet one-on-one or in a small group if you need any more explanation, but hopefully I'll be able to cover as much as possible. So it is a two-part process. We start with screening. So you're going to hear kind of screening and testing. Testing is where that general mental ability falls in. Everybody has to qualify in that area. But the screening is catching the net. And the first thing we're going to do, casting the net, sorry, is in part one, we're going to look at an initial data review. And we're going to use for most students data that already exists. And that's going to be reading and math scores. So for students in pretty much every grade but second grade up to 8th grade, we're going to look at their reading and math scores. And then once we find students who have met our criteria, we're going to then look at those other 2 components of the screener. So we're going to do a teacher rating scale that will be submitted to that classroom teacher to fill out and then returned, as well as a Naglieri general ability test quantitative test, which is a logical reasoning test. So that allows us to get our 3 pieces of data. If the student is in second grade, we are going to actually start with the reasoning, and then we're going to look at the academic data and the teacher data. And you'll see this all come together in a matrix in a minute. So if it seems like a lot, just hold on. I will be able to explain how it kind of comes together. So our eligibility decisions will be in those 2 parts. One, in the screener, our students will need to score basically 20 points on our screener, 10 points in each of those 2 qualifying categories, and we're looking for scores at the 95th percentile. And when we look at reading and math, we're looking kind of like an average of the 95th percentile. So they may score kind of in the 99th percentile in reading, and then a little bit lower in math, but they'll complement each other to get to that kind of middle ground. You can't really do an average with percentiles, but we're looking at that middle ground. We will offer a targeted pathway for students who are English language learners, who have a 504, an IEP, or who receive free and reduced lunch. And in that case, we're looking at that average score of the 84th percentile to yield consideration. Now, one thing to remember is the academic screener is not the make it or break it for further consideration now. So we may have a student who may not hit that 84th percentile, but they have a strong teacher evaluation and they have a strong logical reasoning evaluation. They're still going to move on to further gifted testing. So that accounts for some of those needs for students who may not have the academic because of a learning disability or something like that. And then for our grade 2, we're looking at students at that 95th percentile in the Naglieri general ability test nonverbal. And that's going to be given to all the second graders in January. So we're going to move on to the matrix and tried to give you a couple different ways to look at this matrix. So our typical entry point for our first graders and our 3rd through 5th graders, and really our kindergartners, although we don't universally screen, so I'll talk about them in a minute, would be that academic ability component. And so when you look at that, if a student is in our standard pathway, they're going to get 5 points if they're at the 95th percentile in both. Let's say they're at the 99th percentile. All they need to do is score in the 80 to the 87th to get their 10 points to be considered to move on in the other category. And then if they are of a special population, you can see how they could combine to get those 10 points. That's the starting point, and then they would be administered the other 2 tests. If our second graders are doing, if we're looking at our second graders, they're going to start at area 2, their problem solving and reasoning and ability. If they have the 95th percentile, they're going to have their 10 points, and it's going to signal to do the other 2 assessments. Now, let's say we have a second grader that didn't have a 95th percentile, but their teacher thinks, we need to look at them. The teacher can still do a referral, and we're going to automatically do the other 2 assessments. Or their parent thinks we need to look at them. We'll do that referral. Now, if they're in the 50th, we may talk to the parent and say, no, maybe we need to look at that, but we can still dig in. The data's already available, so it's not that hard to do. Okay, next slide on the matrix. And so then when you look at this slide, this just shows the matrix component for the teacher survey. We're using a published, standardized, and normed teacher survey that rates students on different components, and it breaks it down by category, so we actually have to look at each category to get several different percentiles. So you can actually see that I think a student can get up to 14 points in this area, but we're still looking for that minimum of 10.
I have a question, and I'll do some research on my own, but for this school rating scale, is it kind of double dipping in that there's like academic scores in this, and we've already looked at academic scores?
It's looking more at their classroom performance rather than a standardized test score. So that's something that when we give the form to the teacher, we're going to really steer them towards, let's talk about how they're performing in class, because you know sometimes kids perform better in class than they do on a test too.
Thanks.
So, yeah. And then once we get that data, we're going to take the top 2 scores, we're going to put them in that middle part of the matrix, and if they have 20 points or higher, we are going to go ahead and schedule the general mental ability assessment, which we are looking to move our tool that we use to a new updated revised tool called the KBIT2 Revised. And what this does is it gives us more updated norms, it was normed, I believe, in 2021. And so it takes into account the impact of COVID, it takes into account any sort of bias that could be in questions, and gives us some more updated norms to use. It is also computer scored, so it will save me time with reviewing every teacher's testing protocol, and we'll be able to get that data in fairly quickly.
And then, so we'll use a full scale IQ, not,
This does not yield a IQ.
Okay.
I can't talk. It gives us a general mental
Okay.
ability score, which is like a full scale IQ, but it is not going to be your traditional IQ. DESE does require in their new guidelines that students have a 95th percentile for gifted program qualification. So they do need to score at the 95th percentile, and you can see that on the chart. To get those 20 points, they need to have a score at the 95th percentile. However, we do have a provision for students who have a discrepancy. So when we look at that score, if they're scoring really high in the verbal, on that KBIT, but they're lower in the perceptual reasoning or vice versa, we can dig deeper. We're gonna put in a provision to say students that have that discrepancy, and it's usually gonna be about 15 points, we're gonna do additional testing. And then Jennifer, we would actually go ahead and pursue a full scale IQ score for that student. And we could also use composite index scores as well for qualification. So instead of having, in our previous targeted pathway, we would use just the verbal or just the perceptual reasoning from basically a short IQ test. This actually gives us the opportunity to dig more deeply, get to know the student better, and determine what's the best way to qualify them. But ultimately, at the end, we're looking for that 40 points on the matrix to qualify. So I thought it might be helpful, actually Tara thought it might be helpful to look at a potential student. So we've got Harry Potter here, who was a 2nd grader last year. And so he took the Naglieri General Ability, the Naglieri General Ability Test, nonverbal, and he scored at the 50th percentile. So with our universal screener, we kind of stopped with Harry and said, nope, he's good. He's getting the programming he needs. He does not need gifted services. However, his parents, wanted to tell a different story, and they said, well, can you look at him again? So we said, yeah, absolutely. So we looked at his academic ability, and when you look at that, he had an 88th percentile in reading and a 99th percentile in math. So definitely exhibiting gifted characteristics. Maybe just had a bad day when we gave the Naglieri test. Maybe he's not a good test taker. Who knows? But he had that 13.5 points on the academic, and so we went ahead and gave the teacher the rating scale, and then you can see the teacher rated him with 11 when we did all the percentiles, 11 points. That's enough to go ahead and do the general mental ability test, that test to see if he would qualify for gifted programming. That was administered on the 13th, and he scored a 111. which is at the 77th percentile. So at this time, he doesn't qualify for gifted programming. We can look at him again next year. Now, the only thing to remember is because we did give him an IQ test, we would only be able to give him one more IQ test during his academic career. So that's something that we would talk to the parents. You know, if he has these same scores next year, are you ready? Do you want to wait another year? We can have those conversations. But that's a good way to kind of look at how it all plays out. So with the example with Harry, you see that he was actually part of universal screening, but he was also part of the referral process. So we are going to open up our referrals in a way that's been different from several years. So before I got here, we did allow referrals pretty much any grade level, and we didn't have as much universal screening. We're going to kind of have both now. So we'll have universal screening at first grade through fifth grade, but then we'll also take parent and teacher referrals really in any grade. So whether it's a grade that has universal screening and they don't qualify as part of that process, or it's a grade that does not have universal screening and we haven't picked up that student yet, we will still take those referrals. And you can see the timeline there of kind of when we would promise to assess that child by. We really basically give ourselves a semester to do that assessment. We're going to use that matrix that you saw. Right now it's sort of in paper form. We're hoping to get that into kind of a smart form in EduClimber or some sort of digitized form that will just make data tracking easier. But in the meantime, it's a workable form. It can be, and we're working on talking about getting that uploaded to Infinite Campus so administrators, counselors can see that form and kind of know what's going on. Additionally, we're also going to shift our process of communication. And in the past, as soon as a child qualified, we sent a letter saying your child qualified for LEAP. And then there was sometimes some frustration because Joey didn't get his letter yet, but why hasn't he been tested? And so everybody will get their letter at the same time to kind of clear up some of that confusion. And it also will alleviate that kind of feeling of like, well, Joey qualified, why can't he start tomorrow? We can't test everybody all at the same time. So we'll just do all of our letters at the same time. It will also allow us to communicate with teachers and schools at the same time. So it's not Joey saying to Mrs. Smith, hey, I'm in LEAP, before Mrs. Smith knows that Joey's in LEAP. So everything will kind of come out together. And that's actually standard practice in a lot of districts in our area to do everything sort of at the same time. So you can see the timeline there. Third through fifth grade will be our first focus to get those students assessed so that if they could potentially start LEAP by January. And then the second semester, we'll work on our first, second, and third grade, as well as any referrals that came in that first semester. And so when we look at a new program, we always have to think about the cost. And so our current plan, we're running about $5,000 a year to cover the cost of protocols that we use for our IQ, as well as the second grade screener that we use. Going into this plan, there's going to be some increase in cost, but it's not a huge increase. So about $300 to $400 increase on the yearly cost because we're going to add another Naglieri assessment to get that additional third screening component. And then we are also going to need to pay for those standardized teacher rating scales. We could create our own, but in order to make the process as standard as possible, we want to use something that has national norms and that can be rated in a standard process very easily. The nice thing is it's going to provide some time in my schedule, hopefully, because I won't be reviewing protocols. We'll have some more computerized reports that are available, and so the cost is equal to the time as well. Now, there is one additional one-time cost to provide the kits. So we will be purchasing 6 kits, 1 for each school, so that the gifted specialists assigned to the schools have their own kits to take and do that assessment. But that's just for this year, and then that won't be a reoccurring cost beyond the protocols to replace, and those usually run a couple $100 for like several hundred of them, so it's not too much of an expense. That is what we've put together. I'm just really super grateful for all the committee members. I know Rachel was on the committee and Andrew was on the committee. It really helped to have so many different people putting time and effort into this work. Thank you.
Well, I want to say thank you, and I really like that the sheet, the matrix, I guess you're calling it. I think that's really great. Like right there, you can see what it is. But I didn't hear us address like the other pathway and like creativity or portfolio. Like, have we come up with procedures for those areas yet? Or is that going to kind of be a separate?
So a couple of things about creativity. We looked at 2 different creativity assessments, and the way to score these creativity assessments was not sustainable in our current way of setting up. If I was just a coordinator, like some of the people that visited us, I would have time to do that and organize a team to do that, but managing a building every day, it's just not sustainable. So that's one part of it. The other part is because LEAP does have a lot of academic components, we didn't want to rely too much on creativity. Now, creativity is part of LEAP, don't get me wrong. But we could not find a viable way to incorporate creativity into the assessment. That's why we moved towards the teacher rating scale, because it does look at the teacher's view of creativity. That's one small component of the rating scale, which is not, huge. But the other thing is the reasoning does get a little bit at their creative problem solving as well. So unfortunately,
Well, so then I'm not really hearing like the 4th category of other being addressed though.
So with the other, you get to pick your other, okay? So when we look at our other, so let me go back to my 4 categories. So we're academic ability, our reading and math scores, our general mental ability, which is that final assessment. With the creativity, reasoning, and problem solving, we're using the reasoning problem solving portion. You can basically use any of those 3. And then the other is going to be that gifted characteristics assessment.
Which was the gifted characteristics assessment?
The teacher rating scale.
But isn't that what you're using for the 3rd one also?
No, that's the Naglieri.
Okay,
Yeah, the Naglieri is going to be the creativity, reasoning, and problem solving ability. Yeah.
thank you.
And I'm happy to give you some sample, like we could sit down and look at some Naglieri
I
questions.
trust you. I just was, my
Yeah.
brain was.
And trust me, I took it the other day. I was like, I'm gonna give this to myself and see how I do. And my brain was melting at the end, but
sorry.
that's fine.
I was asking, is the teacher rating scale, is it subjective to where like one 2nd grade teacher will rate a kid one way, but then another one might rate him differently?
There are some elements of subjectivity, so it's on a Likert scale. When the teacher receives the rating scale, they're going to rate on a Likert scale, so 1 not at all to 4 all the time kind of thing. So that reads in some subjectivity to it, and that's particularly why they don't want it to be the one component that would move a child on to their general mental ability testing. It does come with some guidance and some instruction, and we will also put together a letter that helps teachers know what gifted characteristics to look for as they're completing the scale. But yes, it could vary from teacher to teacher.
Could you see yourself doing some norming then with teachers to make sure that they're all just kind of on the same page with that?
Yeah, we are actually looking at using the online version of it, and if we do that, it will likely be able to make it very easy to create some local norming processes. And at this time, we want to use the homeroom teacher because they're going to know the child the best, but we'll be able to start picking up on some trends as well.
I'm kind of curious with have we done kind of some retroactive applications of this? Does that make sense? Look at kids who have already qualified and have their teacher do that teacher scale, things like that?
We have not done that yet, no. We have we've looked at retroactively the Naglieri assessment. So we were actually looking at doing the full Naglieri assessment in replacement of the IQ. So we gave it to all of the PEG students, and about 50% of the PEG students would not have qualified based on their reading score. So when we delve more deeply into it, not their reading score, I apologize, the nonverbal assessment portion. And the nonverbal assessment portion gives you 6 pictures, and you are to identify the picture that doesn't belong from the 6 pictures. And we really think they overthought it. And I took it, and there were some times where it was really hard to figure out what didn't fit. It was a tiny little detail. And so we just decided that is not a good tool to use. So we have been able to do that more with the IQ assessment, the general mental ability assessment, but not with the teacher rating scale. Now, the other possibility, because we need a tool, we need a policy going into the school year, but we also can review at the end of the year and look at the data we've collected and determine if we need to make any changes based on a year of data too.
Thank you.
So do we anticipate some need for professional development then to kind of curb some of that subjectivity for the teacher component, or no?
I think that the professional development most likely will be probably a video or a letter that explains some things. I don't know if we have the capacity to do that district-wide for all the elementary teachers, but I think we could provide some like quick, as you're starting to do this, here's some basic things to think of. I have done videos in the past about identification policy, so this would work for them, is to provide that support.
We've also done faculty meetings before too, to just a quick update. Hey, here are the changes. These are the things you need to know. The challenge with that, which is the reason why I like the video too, is it's relevant in the time, right? If I'm a teacher who I'm not doing any of these rating scales until April, but that faculty meeting was in September, I don't remember what happened there. So the video gives that like, okay, wait, how do I do this? That real-time support.
And if the video
Well, and I
is
imagine
just,
it's a pretty I feel like I've seen those rating scales a lot, and it's pretty like, it is explained in that 1 or 2 sheets of paper.
There are also the gifted specialists that are
In
out
each
there
building.
as a support program for those
Yeah.
homeroom teachers.
and that's, I'm glad that you brought that up, that we can also refer them, like if you have questions about this process or you're not sure how to rate a child, the gifted specialist could come in, kind of do the scoring with you and talk it out as well. And I think linking the video into the letter they get when they receive the rating scale will also help. So I think there's some tools we can provide to.
Yeah, that was a neat part of participating in the committee, is we actually took some of the tests. I'm not gifted anymore. But then we sat and we scored it together and just got to see how people looked at it differently and how that comes in, so.
You said that the general mental ability test is not a traditional IQ test. What's the difference, and is DESE okay with the one that we've chosen?
This is approved by DESE, so DESE only requests that you do a general mental ability assessment, does not require that you do an IQ assessment. And the thing to remember, the biggest difference is that an IQ assessment needs to be administered by somebody who's specifically professionally trained to administer an IQ assessment. So that is why previously I had to review all of the protocols, because while people with advanced degrees can administer an IQ assessment, it cannot be scored by somebody who does not have additional training. So I am trained as a psychological examiner. I can review their scoring, confirm that they have scored correctly, and essentially, complete the report. With the new tool, because it is computer scored and it is a briefer assessment, they do not need that. It does not need to be reviewed by me, because they simply put the scores in. The computer does what I would have been doing. But to be a true IQ assessment, it needs to be scored by a professional, and it needs to be more comprehensive than this. So this is 3 subtests. It need an IQ, even with the WASI that we gave previously, that is still giving you like more of a general mental ability score as well. We've always said that we are qualifying students for LEAP. We are not diagnosing giftedness. And that's something that I think it's important to remember, is your child is showing gifted characteristics, your child is showing that they qualify for our LEAP programming. But a true diagnosis of giftedness would need to come from a professional license to do that.
So I'm grateful for the opportunity to have been a part of this, and just want to emphasize again how deep this process and rich this process was. Secondary level, elementary level, bringing in the gifted specialists from other districts was not only helpful for this process, they were also grateful to learn about what we were doing, and they're going to take some of that back to their programs. But to see how their programs were structured, not every school district has the kids go 1 day a week. There are some districts that are able to employ retired teachers who have the training to give those, I forget the term you just used, Dr. Benerick, but that can actually give those tests. School psychologist.
Like a school psychologist or a psychological examiner.
Right, and we don't have those resources to do that. So, but we have other resources that can do the same thing, and we've come up with ways to make it work for our system. But from programming to sharing ideas, I just think this process was incredible. And so I'm grateful I can't believe it, to the state that they asked us to do this, because I think we've learned a whole lot more than just what they asked us to do, so. And the other thing too, I wanted to add about the gifted specialist, there is a LEAP teacher assigned to each elementary school, and there is hopefully through this process going to be a lot more opportunity for professional development and learning around, like we've had the questions about the characteristics, gifted characteristics, but then how they can also, those teachers, for the kids that don't quite make it past the screener, but still are at that higher end, those gifted specialists will be able to work with those classroom teachers to how can we then help meet these needs better in the traditional classroom if these students aren't going to be in the LEAP program.
And that's another thing that we've embedded in our communication is so that the teachers will get a letter about the students who qualified and some suggestions for what to do with those students in the classroom who qualified. They'll also get a letter about the students who were tested but didn't qualify and some suggestions for those students who kind of, technically were on the bubble. So we're hoping to provide that kind of professional, kind of mini professional development and hey, here are some quick things that you might try with these students as well.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
And thank you to everyone who presented tonight. Yes. So do I have a motion to adjourn Board Workshop 1619?
So moved.
Second?
Okay, I have a motion by Andy and a second by Megan. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 7-0.